Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about one of the things that people often say that is, to me, ludicrous, and I'll explain in a minute why it's ludicrous, because people will say, well, you're coming from the perspective of a power lifter only. No, not really, because I am not hypocritical on this one in any way. I actually believe in training every single rep range. Okay? And even as a powerlifter and a strength athlete, I believe that there is merit and benefit for me to train everything from 1 rep maxes all the way up to 20 and 30 rep sets. I do all of them because there's benefits to every rep range. There are benefits to every athlete and every person even trying to get jacked to every rep range. So when people say things like, well, this type of athlete or this person who's trying to get jacked and powerful and explosive and everything else, or any of those, like there's just no reason for them to do 1 rep maxes. It's not worth the risk, which is ludicrous. It's not worth the training economy. That's a little more logical, because anyone who thinks doing max work is inherently dangerous and that it's more dangerous to hit a 1 rep max than it is a 5 rep max or a 10 rep max is being irrational, because it's not. And there's no reason to actually think that it is. Now, keeping in mind that's in the context of what I prescribe of rotating max effort movements. I'm not talking about hitting a max on the exact same identical lift every week. In fact, that's not even ideal. You don't even want to do that. I don't do that. So you'll have people who will say these things, and we need to address that. The injury one, though, is ludicrous. The evidence for that isn't there. And just because some people have been hurt doing 1 rep maxes, well, using that logic, when I have entire videos and topics and discussions on how to avoid injuries and how to greatly reduce the chances of injuries while doing these things, and I discuss what actually causes the injuries, is ludicrous for someone coming here listening to what I have to say. Because I already have your solutions already on the channel. We discuss this regularly. We know what causes injuries, and it's not because the maxes are heavy. Well, using that logic, I guess 10 rep maxes are heavy also, right? Because, I mean, a lot of my 10 rep sets are heavier than most listeners and many listeners' 1 rep maxes, so therefore they're heavy, and if I get hurt on a 10 rep set, it's because it was heavy. But I digress. The point here being they're not that dangerous. They really aren't. Okay, and then we could talk about the training economy. They don't use that much recovery yet. Right? The recovery that they use relative to the stimulus isn't that significant. I can tell you right now, if you come in and do 5 sets of 5 with your 6 rep max versus doing a 1 rep max, that 5x5 is going to leave you a lot more fatigued. And it should, because it's more work. It's harder. So from a training economy and a recovery perspective, that's not true. And what we need to understand is that there are tangible benefits to maxes, including for people who want to be field athletes, for people who are chasing hypertrophy, all these things. And there's been some pretty good stuff discussing the benefits of different rep ranges. I've even seen guys over at the Science and Strength blog who've looked at a lot of that there seems to be some unique hypertrophic component to every rep range. So in other words, if a person wants to gain as much muscle as they possibly can, they're like, I really want to maximize every last drop of muscle mass that I can get, you're probably going to use reps as low as singles all the way up to reps as high as 30. Okay? You're going to do that if you are knowledgeable on the science of hypertrophy and your goal is to get as much muscle as you can. Because if you skip any rep range entirely, you're shortchanging some potential anabolic pathways. Furthermore, we know that 1 rep max lifts hit all the upper threshold fibers and fatigue them. Okay? That means that if you do a 1 rep max and then you do 5 sets of 10 afterwards, even on some other lift, obviously a lot of our max lifts we don't want to hit those sort of volumes with, that you're going to stimulate more adaptation than if you had just done the 5x10. Okay? In other words, you've already hit the same upper threshold fibers and exhausted them on a true max, even if it's a training max because you didn't get overly psyched up and it was a little grindy. You hit the same fibers that you would hit on failure on one of those 10 rep sets. Arguably, some of the neuromuscular components, in particular the intramuscular coordination, can only be achieved with the max weights. So you're going to have performance components that are only achieved there. You're going to have some hypertrophic potential that's only achieved there, but it's still going to add to your hypertrophy for the session. And as far as people saying, well, it fatigues you too much, does it? Because you guys have watched me hit some pretty big volume numbers after maxing out. I have clients who do it. Plenty of people do it. Once you get used to using tools, they don't beat you up that much. In other words, they don't interfere with the rest of your training significantly. Okay? You guys have watched me do 10, 15, and 20 rep sets on some exercises with numbers that shock people after doing a max. Once you're used to maxing and then training, it actually isn't even a big deal in terms of resources. You can hit the same numbers. In other words, my 3x10 after a 1 rep max is probably pretty close to what my 3x10 is without having done the max. It might be a small difference. Okay. It's not that big of a deal. It's relatively insignificant. But the 1 rep max still adds to your total training fatigue and stimulus. Okay, so there are benefits to all that. Then we come over to the point of people saying, well, this athlete doesn't need it. Really? You're telling me that developing the intramuscular coordination to move maximum weights relatively quickly and training for that level of force production has no benefit to boxing or American football or rugby or MMA? You're telling me the ability to hit, push, or pull harder with more force, because you've trained yourself to do so, has no benefits to these sports? Well, I'm sorry, the basic laws of biomechanics say you're wrong. Your ability to produce force, which again, a lot of it's trainable at the intramuscular level, absolutely impacts punching power when you connect. Now, when you say that, you have idiots who say, oh, you're saying just because a guy has a big bench press that he can punch. No, I didn't say or imply any such nonsense. I'm telling you that when you know how to punch, that a Mike Tyson, right? Let's take someone who no one's going to argue about his ability to punch. No one on earth is going to argue that Mike Tyson doesn't know how to punch really, really well. Only a clown would argue that. Mike Tyson, when he can bench 225 for a max versus Mike Tyson when he can bench 450 for a max, can punch harder. Okay? Why? Because his muscles are stronger. They have more intramuscular coordination. From the max, it's not just the hypertrophy. We could build the potential to have a 450 bench, and it's another thing to actually hit a 450 bench. Because the guy who can actually hit it has developed the intramuscular coordination in his pecs, his shoulders, his triceps. Well, that means he can produce more force on any similar movement. That includes punching, assuming he's a skilled puncher and knows how to punch. Okay? It's not a difficult concept to understand. What else does this affect? Well, this affects anything where you need force production. When you hit someone on a football field, when someone sprints, that first step, okay, that ability to produce maximum force, an all-out force, is trainable with 1 rep maxes. Changes your intramuscular coordination of the muscles involved. You know, all these other sports, there's benefits. Yes, there are reasons to do it. So what people try to argue is, okay, well, maybe if there is, there might be better use of our training resources, or what about the risk? It's like, I'll tell you right now, doing a training max on various squat variations in a safe environment where you're not using bad programming, you have less risk of getting hurt doing that than you do sprinting in an all-out sprint out on the field. Okay? Sprinters get hurt all the time just sprinting. That's dangerous. So what are you talking about? It's not dangerous to max out. I'm talking about in competition. When I'm talking about a psyched up competition max where you peaked and you're screaming and using whatever you're using to get that extra drive, not the same thing as coming in the gym and hitting a max calmly. Relatively low risk. No riskier than other forms of training for the most part. So using that logic, you should just never train. You shouldn't lift at all because you might get hurt. And that's not going to work. But we have all the performance benefits. We have the potential hypertrophy benefits. There's a lot of reasons for people to max out, just like there's a lot of reasons for people to use every rep range. And again, people will say, well, only powerlifters says, no, I'm the same powerlifter who's telling you that there are merits for powerlifters to do 20 rep sets. Now that's controversial, because I can tell you right now there's a lot of powerlifters who will deny that. No, there's no way. That's cardio. I do 20s. I do 30s on some movements. You know why? Because there's benefits to doing it. And we have to be willing to acknowledge those benefits. And we have to be willing to acknowledge the benefits of every rep range. They all have uses. And they all have uses that a lot of us, and maybe even most of us, can benefit from if we're willing to utilize them correctly. All right, guys. Well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.